If you only were a Nebraska fan, you would realize that it's been a while since they had a win like that. Even though Colorado, we don't know what their record's going to be, if they're going to end up with 6-7 more wins or a bowl team. But that was something special, and I still couldn't, because of their history, really enjoy it until the very, very end. And Paul knows the rules. He sent me a text pretty much afterwards about the game, because it's been such a mess in the last decade. Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina, I'm David Smoak. We're on set today. We take you, as we always are, up until 6 o'clock, and a lot to get to. I did not put the Nebraska helmet on the chair, on the desk. I did not do that. That was your decision. Okay.
That was me. Look, Smokey, you've been walking through the desert for a while, and by no means should you consider this an oasis, but at least it's not a mirage.
Well,
like it was a resounding win. It was a physical win. It was everything you want to see from a Nebraska team. They looked, especially defensively to me, how I remember Nebraska looking, where they hit you and made you like it. Number 9, maybe my favorite player in the country right now, their big defensive tackle. He's just a monster. I enjoyed watching that game thoroughly. Nebraska's on the way up, and Colorado hasn't fixed anything that was wrong with them last year.
Yeah, I mean, that was an awesome win for Nebraska. It's been a long time coming. You could see that it's in the reaction of the fans and the amount of excitement in that stadium, the importance that you could sense as that game kicked off and in the build-up to it. That meant a lot. That meant a lot to beat Colorado and have their fans pack out for what feels like maybe a renaissance of Nebraska football. Long way to go. They didn't beat a great team necessarily on Saturday, but it was an important win nonetheless. Had lost 3 to Colorado in that 4-game series, so got a win before that thing finished. And I don't know when they'll play again, but that had to feel pretty good to not get swept, but also to have a showing like that on national television and to start off 2-0 and to beat a team that, runs their mouth a little bit and is probably the most hated team in the country at the moment, most disliked team in the country at the moment. And you didn't like the way they kind of treated you last year. And there's just a lot of stuff swirling in the air. And Nebraska had the big moment in front of them, and they took hold of it and grabbed it by the steering wheel and rode that bad boy into a great victory on Saturday night. So, that was awesome. Congrats to you and all the rest of the Nebraska fans. I think it opens up or just confirms a lot of questions about Colorado and just what that whole situation is and what that's going to look like moving forward. But a nice slice of humble pie in some ways, and we'll see what Matt Rule and company can, do with this. But I am not surprised that he's got them chugging on along, and I'm not surprised they won that game on Saturday. That always kind of felt like just the feeling going into this one, that would be the end result. But I think how one-sided it was in the first half was really impressive.
Yeah, they did. The first half looked like a team. They got to learn how to play longer than that because it got ugly. But I did not put the helmet on the desk, but I appreciate Paul for doing that. And I rarely ever will wear a logo shirt. I'm not one of those guys because for the longest time I was used to them winning. And then of course there's the abyss. And so it's kind of impressive. I was thrilled and so happy for Matt Rule and the team, but a lot more to get to. That was one game. The most impressive win, in my opinion, no question, was Texas. We kind of thought that they might be able to hammer Michigan, and they absolutely did. The most shocking win was Northern Illinois and Notre Dame. And then there were some adventurous games too. And let's get to that. Here's the top 25 poll that was released. And I don't think there's anything that's much of a surprise. A couple of teams have entered the poll. I think there is a chance, and this is without getting in over my skis. Georgia plays in Austin later this season, might play them in the SEC championship game, and hell, they might meet somewhere in the semis or who knows for the championship. And that's not to forget about everybody else, but those two, Georgia coasted, they were supposed to, but they were so good against Clemson. That's the top 25 poll. Big 12 with Utah, dropped a spot despite a win. Oklahoma State loses their best defensive player, maybe in Colin Oliver at 13. Then you see Kansas State. They're playing Arizona. Arizona's 20th. And then you have Iowa State with a great win. And that might have been the most satisfying win for anybody against Iowa on the long field goal. So there you have the top 25.
Well, Georgia in that top 5 plays everybody in the top 5 except for Ohio State.
That's right.
So they play Alabama in a couple weeks on the road. They play Ole Miss also on the road, and they play Texas on the road. So, look, if they go through all those 3, and there's not a whole lot of reason to think, not to mention they also play Tennessee at home the week after they play Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So Georgia's schedule, nobody's, like crying tears for them like they are for, say, Oklahoma, who's got a really hard schedule, or Florida, who's also on that Georgia schedule. But
if you thought Oklahoma's schedule was hard,
I mean,
prior to what they did against Houston, it just went up another notch.
But nobody's crying tears for them. But
yeah,
this was not an easy schedule either. So
no, absolutely.
But but it's Georgia, so nobody cares.
Well, Georgia, Texas will be a mega showdown when that time comes. But the thing that jumps out to me is 6 of the top 7 are from the SEC.
Yeah,
I don't want to do the conference pride thing over every little metric, because that's now what everybody does. But I mean, it's hard not to notice, right? I mean, it's impossible not to notice, especially when that's kind of an historic thing. And I don't know, if Ohio State slips up, it's a very real possibility you could have the entire top 5. I mean, the odds of that are unlikely, but it's within play. And that's not something that's ever typically within play historically, is to have 6 of the top 7 or, nearly the entire top 5. So that'll separate somewhat. But when you have the bigger conferences, not really, because they're not all going to play each other. And if Georgia, Texas play each other close, one of them's going to drop like a spot. So
maybe
that's a stranglehold on the top that will be interesting to see how much stronger that becomes, or how it loosens it all. But that is definitely a unique metric from this week. And I think when it comes to 12 through 14, which is where you see that Big 12 log jam, that with the questions about Cam Rising now, and Oklahoma State's looked okay, but definitely has warts, and K-State has looked okay, but definitely has warts. It's kind of a log jam, but Arizona has won both games but has warts. Iowa State had the big win over the weekend, but I think that all those teams are close, and rightfully so, because that's kind of just the way the Big 12 looks like it's shaping up, as a handful of teams that will maybe just all be up on each other, or maybe somebody emerges out of that pack, but I don't think anybody is distinctly better than the other. But if I had to go with somebody at the top, it would still be Utah, even with the question about Rising. That is something to monitor, however. Nice for Nebraska to be in the poll after that win, but I know Matt Rule has said something along the lines of like, that's not anything.
We have bigger plans.
Yeah, they have bigger plans. BC's in the poll. So Castellanos and company finding them their way in there. That's good for them. And obviously Northern Illinois deserves to be rewarded as well. So yeah, it's still needing a lot to sorting out, but those are just a couple of things that jump out to me.
A couple of more things. By the way, 1971, it was 1, 2, and 3. Nebraska, Oklahoma, Colorado finished the year 1, 2, and 3, with Nebraska beating those two, Oklahoma beating Colorado. And so they finished 1, 2, and 3 from the same conference in 1971. It might have happened elsewhere, but but we see a possibility of that this year.
You know what jumps out to me real quick is that right there in the middle of the poll is the Utah, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Oklahoma, LSU are all right there together. And all of them this week had moments.
Yeah. Well, Utah, they were never sweating.
Well, yeah.
They dominated really that game. There was a couple of times, but they were the better team.
They have a dear God, what's going on moment with Cam Rising his fingers.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to some of the injuries, some of the better performances, et cetera, in a moment. Texas mauled Michigan. It was never close. Shut up 110,000 people. We knew they were good. We didn't know quite how good because they lost a lot of people too, but they went into Ann Arbor. And this is something that for a long time, they could talk about culture. They didn't have it. They were I don't know if the word is entitled, spoiled, or they just felt like because they were in Austin, things were going to go their way. Not like they didn't have some nice wins along the way, but this is the message that Steve Sarkisian from day one tried to get and implement into the program. And this was his message after they beat Michigan on Saturday.
Listen, the reason I'm saying all this is, guys, we have a formula for success. And it doesn't matter what uniform they wear. It doesn't matter what helmet they wear. It doesn't matter where the arena is. If we prepare right and we go play our brand, our style of football, we're good. we're good, but we need to understand the mental intensity it takes when we get right back to work again next week. Okay, we got to go right back to work because this journey ain't over, man. It ain't even close to being over.
All right, so there's Steve Sarkisian. I reached out to Texas and said, hey, can we use that? And John Bianco said, yes, that came from @TexasFootball on Twitter. That's hard to say. I mean, it's hard no matter if you say it, you still got to be able to do it. And it didn't happen overnight.
The biggest thing that you have to get is you have to get your team to enjoy the grind to win this. And it sounds like Texas right now is enjoying that work and that they're looking forward to getting back to work. Not sitting on their laurels and saying, hey, we just went to the big house and won. Just like last year we went to Tuscaloosa and won. Is to have them excited about getting ready to go back to work, to play this week against a team that not near as legendary as Michigan, that they're going to have to do that each and every week, and that they have those things ahead of them in the SEC where you're going to have to prepare like it's Michigan on the road every single week. You can't take a week off and hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, going to the big house and playing Michigan is slightly different than hosting UTSA after they've been blown out by Texas State. So, yeah, you've got to get into the minds of these players and let them know that what they're doing is really special and they've got a lot of upside, but that it's 2 weeks in and there's 10 games to go. And the plan is to have more than 10, but the degree to which they have more than 10 is going to depend on, the week to week and staying locked in. But if they do, then they are a really good football team, if not the best team in the country. I know Georgia has something to say about that, but it's week 2. So, until that time comes where we see them play on the field, which we will, there's going to be conversations, and I think it's very fair to have a conversation 2 weeks in about Texas being one of, if not the best teams in the country. They've earned that. They earned that on Saturday, and that was not the Michigan team from last year, clearly, but it was impressive nonetheless. The way they were able to waltz in there and just kind of dictate things and look like by far the better team throughout the afternoon. Quinn Ewers was excellent. He's got a flair for the big game. I know that's been kind of a talking point, but it's true. He just seems to have an extra layer to him when it comes to performing in big-time showdowns, and they're going to have a lot of those upcoming with the way they are situated and with the games on their schedule. So you've got to be feeling great, but you also know there's a long way to go. So it shouldn't stop you from celebrating, but if you're these players, Sark's message rings true that you've got to stay locked in because you've got something really, really cool, but you've got to keep doing it week to week. And that's the grind. And that's what some teams can't do or what some teams do better than others. And that's how you win championships. So they're in that conversation, but they got to keep locked in.
Yep, they do. And they have UTSA. They're wounded after getting thumped by G.J. Kinney. Jeff Traylor even said, I can understand why people don't believe in us right now. They got hammered badly by Texas State, first time that the Bobcats had beaten the Roadrunners. BU at 12 with Patrick. Utah dominated, ? I guess if you count a defensive, they dominated that game. Were there moments when Baylor could have done something to possibly make it tight, like 23-12 when they cut it, and then they give up what was it, Craig? You mentioned it in your article, a 70-some yard drive, took 8 minutes off the clock. I never once thought Baylor had a chance to win that game after the first 5 to 10 minutes. And a kick return or a block punt return counts. A strip sack that sets up a touchdown counts. Did Baylor end up, I thought it would be 31-14 or something like that. So the 23-12 looks okay, but I thought that Utah dominated that game.
I think it's just splitting hairs. I think, Utah dominated that game. That's not to say Baylor didn't play well in some areas or that they didn't have moments or that they didn't keep it close. But I think you factor in the Cam Rising injury and the fact he didn't play the entire second half. And when he went out, it was 20-3 or something along those lines that Baylor had gotten the field goal right before halftime. So they were able to finally get on the board, but their offense could do really much of nothing. They opened that up in the second half. Cam Rising doesn't play defense, so they did find a little something, but they're basically explosive player bust. That's what their offense is, and they had like 2 of them on Saturday that helped set up points. But beyond that, they scored 12 points. They scored 12 points. Utah didn't score in the second half, right? And Cam Rising didn't play in the second half, so I get where you're coming from, but I think you're kind of getting into a pointless argument because
it's not pointless.
No, I'm saying in general, the whole what's Patrick saying? It's okay, sure, but it was pretty one-sided. Like, if you don't want to call it a blowout, that's fine, but we're kind of arguing semantics here because that game was never really that close, and it looked like it could be close at the end, and then Utah ran like 8 minutes off the clock, so they never allowed it to get too close for comfort. But, yeah, I mean, it's not one of those that, like, you got devastated and, destroyed, but it was pretty one-sided. I don't know how you'd see it other than that.
DeQuan Finn could not have bribed the defense at a stretch to let him complete a pass. I mean, he was.
Well, he also couldn't complete it sometime on his own.
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't just the protection. It was sometimes, hey, you've got to play, and you just airmailed it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, he could have gone to all of them and been like, hey, I'm going to give you guys $50 a piece if you'll just let me complete one pass right now. And they'd be like, no, there's no money. Like, he was off really badly. They were wonky on offense, to say the least. I mean, they got a couple things going, but Cam Rising apparently isn't hurt too terribly bad, and Utah felt confident enough in its defense to just let him roll out in the second half in street clothes and chill out and not try to push it.
Yeah, so there we are. Utah wins. We're going to get to some of the other Big 12 games in a moment. I tell you what I want to do. I want to just do give me the Thomas Hammock on the trying to still recruit. He's the Northern Illinois head coach. He's going to join us today at 4 o'clock. We still looking for a few pieces to finish this class: offensive line, defensive line, corner specialist, snapper, punter, kicker. Send your film. A great chance to take advantage of what Northern Illinois was able to do. Now, Garrett, go to the next two on Northern Illinois from Front Office Sports. The Irish paid them $1.4 million to play in South Bend. Now, that's usually the cost, $1 million to $1.8 million, $2 million for teams to come, travel to play, so you get your 75 to 100,000 or even 50,000 fans. That's what you can do. Also, that's what happened in winning the game. Biggest upset for them, of course, in program history. Then John Fanta had this note, and then we talk about the game. From Fox Sports Research, MAC teams were 0-50 against top 5 teams in the AP since 1978. Now, 1-50 with Northern Illinois making history in South Bend. As good as the nice win was in College Station, they turned around and blew a tire and lost. And Marcus Freeman, of course, and company, they have to be wondering what in the hell happened.
I'll tell you what happened. I don't know what Mike Denbrock's doing there. I mean, like, what's he calling? Like, that surprises me because he's one of the better offensive minds in the country, but he's not playing to the strengths of Riley Leonard right now in that offense. He's trying to do things that I just don't think are in their nature. And the other thing that happened is they clearly did not take, like, they looked at the spread of that game and they didn't take Northern Illinois as seriously as they did. Thomas Hammock, this is not, the first good thing that's happened. I mean, he was the MAC coach of the year just 3 years ago. He knows what he's doing. He had his guys prepared to go. And I think sometimes you're Notre Dame, you have to realize that, yeah, you are favored by 28 points, but this team coming in here, this is the biggest deal for them to come into South Bend and get to play here, a place that most of them would have never even called them to come and play there or take a visit. None of that stuff. So you're going to get people's best shot when you're Notre Dame. You need to know that they got it, and they just were not ready for it.
Yeah, Adam Rittenberg had a really good article and all the connections to Indiana and all of that. And I know we're going to talk to Thomas Hammock, but his background and how it all played into Saturday and it's a pretty cool story. So if you haven't checked that out and you want more on that game, then Adam Rittenberg's got a nice write-up. But that was shocking in the best kind of ways. That's why you watch college football as much as everything starts to favor the favorites. So more and more every year with every rule that's passed or every law that's, changed or made, it seems to favor the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Texases more than it does the Northern Illinois. And yet here's a team making the most of their situation and going beating one of those teams that usually gets the favored status. And so that was a beautiful thing to see, unless you were a Notre Dame fan, obviously, or unless you were somebody who had money on the Irish. But I was certainly not expecting that result. And yet by the time it was all over, I don't think anybody was all that surprised because this is kind of the Marcus Freeman story at Notre Dame in so many ways. Yep. And that's unfortunate for him. But I know some people feel like he lost his job on Saturday. Barring a miracle national title run, that's the kind of loss that plants the seeds, or the losses he had previous that were similar to this are the types that plant the seeds that no matter how many times you win 10 games or go to a bowl game, you're Notre Dame and you shouldn't be losing to Northern Illinois. in any circumstances, much less the ones on Saturday. So that is something to monitor. But that was just great college football moments that we saw on Saturday from Northern Illinois. And that's why you watch the game and you love the game, at least for the most part, most people. And I was just, just excited for them and excited to see what comes from that game. But that was pretty cool.
I can't wait to talk to Coach Hammock. I reached out to his media relations director yesterday evening, followed up earlier this morning, and she said, oh, that's right. Hold on, we'll get back with you. And she said, how about 4:00? He'll join us at that time. Here's one stat. Max Olson had this one. Shedeur Sanders in that loss to Nebraska, and he was beaten and battered, pressured on 22 dropbacks, 5 of 5 passing, 5 of 15 for 45 yards, 1 touchdown, 5 sacks, 1.8 quarterback ranking. Nebraska rushed 3 or 4 on 19 of the 22 dropbacks, and they still were able to put pressure on him.
Yeah, they're off. The offensive line at Colorado is not good. And it's not only maybe a talent issue, it's very much a schematic issue. They do not get after people. They're on their heels automatically every time. The offense is not built around running the ball at all, so they have no run blocking chops to them. And Nebraska's got a defensive line that was good last year. It was good a year ago. Now that they have more confidence, they have confidence in their offense, they're playing with their ears back a lot more and not playing so cautious. Tony White's one of the best schematic defensive coordinators in the country, was Matt Rule's best hire when he got there. And clearly that is the spirit of this team, runs through the defense, which is what Matt Rule wants anyway. And they absolutely beat them up early and let Colorado know that finesse is not going to do it for you here. You're going to have to fight with us, and they could not stand toe-to-toe with them.
When Tommy Hill had that pick near the 5 or 10 yard line, I have not felt that kind of moment in 10 years where I squealed like a teenage girl who bumped into Taylor Swift. And that just set the tone after the pressures they had on her early. It wasn't great in the second half, but Craig, that defense did play well. And Shedeur, after the game, it was constantly about, he was talking about I didn't have time to throw it, how many times did Dylan Raiola get hit, etc. And then he left early in the game, like 2.5 minutes left in the game. I don't think that was a good look by any means.
Yeah, the coverage of Colorado is just so weird. It's like hard to know what to believe and what is people putting extra mustard on things or what is actually something that's pretty egregious. You know what I mean? Like, because there's definitely agendas when it comes to just Deion and it goes both ways. So I don't know, and the reason why I say that is like the Shedeur leaving at the end of the game. Like, was it concussion protocol? Because some people think that it was. Or was it Deion being full of crap because he's covering for his son because his son was a poor sport and left early? I'm inclined to believe, and I think most people believe it's the latter. I don't know for sure, and I know it's stupid and bad sports radio to just give the benefit of the doubt, but, you can see why those things add up over time. So I don't know. Like, I don't believe just every little thing that comes out on Twitter, because Twitter is half full of crap. I mean, it truly is at this stage. So, initially I started seeing some of that stuff after the game, but the more and more you're reading up, like there's a story on I know
where you're going.
The Nebraska radio station website had the story about the music playing for Shedeur.
That's false.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying.
False.
That's going around. There's major.
Yeah, well, when he scores, they don't play the school song.
Before I got here, there's a major podcaster who does college football with like 100,000 followers and probably millions of listens, and he's reporting on that. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's a bullshit story that is being thrown around by the major college football personalities and treated as fact, but it's not true. So, that's what I'm talking about. So that's why I'm inclined to say, did Shedeur have a head injury? And no, I don't believe that, actually. I do believe it was poor sportsmanship. But you have to at least go, well, wait a second, because if you just go by reactions, you believe everything that's negative.
Yeah, you could go bouncing back and forth like you're in a time.
And I'm not trying to cover for Deion. I do think that they are poor sports. I think they were poorly prepared. I do think they're a slightly, and by slightly, I mean razor-thin better version of last year. I don't know that they'll go bowling because they're so much like last year's team. I do wonder how long Shedeur's going to hang in there at this rate. And I do wonder if there are any remnants of the Sanders clan in Boulder after this year. All that's very fair.
Well,
but people are just so quick
Shiloh
to react to this family that it's hard to even wade through
What's
all
true
of the
or not,
smoke and mirrors. Yeah.
Shiloh had surgery on his forearm. You mentioned that. Shador took a beating. Maybe he just needed to get in the hell, or because if they win that game, is he bouncing around, throwing up the look at my ring or my watch or whatever? So there's where that comes in, and that was.
I gave Shador a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in that he was physically mauled in that game, and if he was going to go out 2 minutes before it was over and go to the locker room, like I kind of didn't care about it. I was like, look, if you got beat up in the game, go like. If they're checking on him, the problem was it wasn't. I think where it looks bad is he was not going there with trainers. It was just
I get it. I get it.
That's where people like, okay, if you're beat up, then why are that like? There's no trainer going.
They don't do that for any other quarterback though.
No,
like that's my point. And then after the game, and look, I'm not defending Colorado. Like I'll say it. Like poor sports. Yup. Like things here and there you can criticize. Absolutely. I just don't like the line. Like there's enough going wrong that you don't need to make up stuff to try to make it look worse than it is when it's already bad. Like, for example, Shador in the post game, I see the same people like, oh, my God, he's throwing his O-line under the bus. And I actually watched the video, and I'm like, okay, I can see where you're coming from, but it's not as egregious as it was being made out to be either. It wasn't like he's like, these guys are bums. He was saying, like, he was getting hit a lot. The other guy wasn't. Guess what? That was true. Now, is that quarterback leadership that you want to see? Maybe not. So I'll back away from that there.
Yeah, but that's kind of throwing your offensive line a little bit under the bus, which they already know.
No, it is. It's fine. But I'm saying the way it was described, the way I initially saw it was like I was expecting it to be like these guys suck, they're bums, and then I watched it. And I'm like, okay, I can see where you're coming from, but yeah, you probably should have worded that a little bit differently.
Was he throwing his offensive line or his coordinator under the bus? Because he was talking about, we got to shoot our shot, and if you can't run the ball, let's do what we do.
See, I don't know. Like either way, you can pick it apart, and either way, you have a valid point. I just don't think there needs to be all this extra mustard on the Colorado story, like the music thing, for example. I just feel like that's taking something that's already good enough to pick apart and adding, lies to it, basically. But yeah, that was not a good look in any way, shape, or form. And you wonder how much others are looking at Shador and just the way he's handling things and going, well, I don't like the way he walked off early. I don't like the way he threw his offensive line under the bus. And man, we're 2 weeks in, so you don't need to make up stuff.
Travis Hunter most receivers want the ball. He's frustrated. He had 8-9 catches for 110 yards, but he was pretty much bubble wrapped.
Oh, they were totally neutered. I mean, Nebraska beat their backsides, and they didn't leave any doubt about who the better team was. So all that's very fair. I just don't feel like you got to create stuff to add more to what's already kind of a messy situation. That's all.
All right, here we go on a couple of things. Let me get to a couple of individual things, Garrett. Let's go to Ashton Jeanty and then Scattaboo. All right. So Ashton Jeanty, Boise State. My goodness, they were right on the cusp of a great win, and they just could not quite seal the deal. And Ashton Jeanty, look at this stat. He's on pace right now. And again, it's going to be hard to keep up 250-something yards a game. But that's where he is at 459, 9 touchdowns. And he's on average to break the possibility of breaking Barry Sanders' single-season record, which is just over 2,600. We've discussed him. Everyone knows we're a part of his PR campaign. But he earns that. What he's done and what he did with Oregon and what he's done so far has been spectacular. And he had another big game against a team that a lot of people thought early on could be playing maybe in the college football playoff, winning the Big Ten, possibly a national championship caliber team, although they've got to get better too. But that's another story with Oregon. That's Ashton Jeanty.
Before we say Oregon's not as good, maybe we need to admit that Boise State is really good. Because that could have just been 2 good teams playing right there. Now, should Oregon maybe be a little better than they have been early on? Yeah, but I don't want to take away anything from what Boise State did on Saturday and what Ashton Jeanty is doing, which is fantastic and should be the Heisman frontrunner through 2 weeks. If you can even say you have one, what he's done the first 2 weeks of the season is electric and fantastic. And I hope everybody outside the blue turf knows that he's doing it too.
Yeah, he's good. He's so fun to watch.
Yeah, he was great on Saturday. They just didn't have enough in the end, and it wasn't on him by any means. He did his part, and he's somebody who's looking like he's got a real opportunity to end up in New York at the end of the year, and that's a really difficult task these days for somebody playing at a school like Boise State. So that's just how good he has been and how good he's been these first couple of weeks. So he's setting himself up really well. That would have been a a monstrous win, obviously, but I do think that part of that is Boise State's pretty good. They just didn't have enough around his performance to nail the door shut. And I do think Oregon's skating on real thin ice. I do wonder if part is it's a little bit of both. It's that they're not as good as maybe expected, but also Boise State was better than maybe people anticipated. But Oregon certainly playing with a lot of fire here early on, but that was a really fun game, and I was bummed they couldn't pull it out because that just would have been a great upset, but it was a valiant showing nonetheless, and he's making a lot of noise and hearing his name a lot around a lot of different college football talking circles.
We will have our Big 12 pod today at around 4:25. One more team that's off to a nice start, and who knows how long they continue it, and that's not the downgrade what they've done because they have won twice. Arizona State beating SEC's Mississippi State, and Cam Skattebo, 33 carries, 262 yards, scored 3 times, also had some receiving yardage, and was a dude in that win. A really nice start for Kenny Dillingham and the Sun Devils.
I was surprised by this, but maybe not as surprised as I would have been normally. Kenny Dillingham's one of the best offensive minds in football. If he's got tools, he's gonna be able to use them. And so I'm not surprised that this happened, especially in a transitional year, especially first year for Jeff Lebby on the road. It probably felt like 3:00 in the morning to them because they kicked off so late, all those things. But Arizona State took it to them and off to, let's see how they do. I mean, I really like Kenny Dillingham. I think he's got huge potential as a coach. And if Arizona State can ever get out of their own way, they're going to be fun to watch.
They're way better than people expected. A lot of people, myself included, had them towards the bottom of the Big 12. It was a really nice win. I think Mississippi State's a fine team. They're not very good, but that's still a team who's probably, bigger and stronger than you in a lot of areas. And, Skattebo said after the game that he felt disrespected by them putting like 3 guys on the line and expecting that to be enough to stop him in that running game. And so they had a point to prove, and I think they proved it loud and clear that they are not going to be a bottom dweller this year. They're going to be much better than people anticipated. And in the case of Mississippi State, a lot tougher than the Bulldogs anticipated. So they had a big play. I don't know if you saw Cullen Fight with a touchdown.
Our young man from Tatum who
Blake
joined
Shapen
the show.
with a bad decision that, I wondered after week 1, he had a really nice week, and it's like, okay, but I wondered how that was going to settle in, and then that looked a lot like Blake Shapen at Baylor. It didn't look that much different. Like a play like that, especially of just trying to make something out of nothing, but it turns into disaster. That was a huge play in that game. But, yeah, they pretty much controlled that. Looked like they were going to give it up late, potentially, but were able to hold on, and that would have been an awful loss had they not been able to hold on. But they did, and so it was an impressive win, and one that you definitely feel like has got them on a pretty nice trajectory right now. If, they can just keep running the ball that well, they're going to have to get more out of the passing game, but I do think they are better than expected.
They have Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, and Ole Miss. Those are 5 of the top 7 teams in the country right now on their schedule, plus games that who knows what happens with Florida.
On Mississippi
A&M.
State's schedule, you mean?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought I was saying that. A&M and Arkansas along. They have a UMass game stuck at the end, but they got Toledo this week. So they may win a few, but it's going to be a tough road with who's on their schedule at this particular time.